Welcome to the Portland Real Estate Podcast, Oregon and Southwest Washington's #1 show for real estate news and information. Without further ado, here are your hosts and a couple of guys who, as busy realtors and successful brokerage owners, know a thing or two about real estate. Steve Nassar of Premier Property Group and Joe Festolo of Soldera Properties. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our latest episode of the Portland Real Estate Podcast. Gosh, Joe, do you remember? It is episode number 161. 161. Yeah. So I'd love to tell you guys that we planned it this way and that we were going to be coming live on the air with our powerhouse real estate panel 20 minutes after the Fed dropped rates a whopping 50 basis points, but I just didn't do that. That was not how this played out. I did realize it a couple days ago, or maybe even a week ago. I was like, hey, I think that's Fed Day when we're going on the air. We always do our podcast, Joe, on Wednesdays, and we always do them at 11:30. So it just so happened that this Wednesday at 11, they made the big announcement, which is the first Fed funds rate drop in 4 years, and it signals the end of a tightening cycle that we've had our two guests on twice for, where we talked about the changing markets and interest rates going up and what that was going to do, and we projected what it was going to do, and then we came back and talked about what it was doing, and here we are today. We're going to talk about that. We're going to also talk about some big changes in our industry with regards to commission structures and lawsuits and some settlements with the National Association of Realtors. So, Brittany Gibbs, Heather Robbins, welcome both back. We are always thrilled to have you guys. You are little rays of sunshine and so knowledgeable and so good at what you do and just great guests on our show. So, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Rays of sunshine. What a kind compliment. I already feel better. Thanks, Steve.
It's great being back on a panel with you two again. I know, Brittany, we did one in the interim over at, what was it, Meadowood Builders?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did that. This has been a big topic. This has been the topic of 2024. It's NAR changes and then buyer rep agreements. And, you know, I've had so much of it. If we never talk about it again, it's too soon. But I guess the first question that I wanted to ask both of you at a very, very high level, own your own companies. How's business? How's 2024 shaken out for both of your businesses so far?
It's a great year. And, you know, we were practicing our buyer presentation and buyer reps last October. We had our buyer's guides ready. So on August 13th, when that rolled out, I'm like, yeah, we've been doing this. Like, we're prepared. So that part of it, the whole NAR settlement, I honestly feel like it was made a lot bigger than it actually needed to be. And so we're practiced, we're rolling it out, no problem. Sales are down a little bit, and yet I will tell you the quality of the sales are really good. Like I just feel like our clientele, we've just gone to the next level. Like the people that we want to work with are coming, and it feels so good to work with just incredible human beings. I just feel really grateful. Like, so maybe if sales are down, no problem. The trade-off of working with just really fabulous people all day long, I'll take that. So I would say 2024 has been great. I'm really enjoying it.
Especially on the buyer side, right? I mean, I don't know how that would be different on the listing side per se, but on the buyer side, you're absolutely right. Like, people are either going to work with you up front or they're not. And I'm okay with either. Right? Well, I mean, I'd rather they work with us, but hey, at least we're knowing right up front, right?
Exactly.
I think it weeds out a lot of the fake the buyers that are just using people and stuff like that. I mean,
yeah.
And I feel like, you're actually working with people that are going to work with you.
Absolutely. And we get to dictate what we make. I mean, that's new on the buyer side, right? Before it was always, we were at the mercy of what other listing they fell in love with.
How's your business, Brittany? is up or down or about the same?
About the same as last year. I felt like last year we had a rough winter. Like winter was, I felt like it was very quiet. This year I feel like it's been really consistent, really good. And just like Heather, we've been working on all of our stuff way before August. I felt like our agents were really, really confident going into it. There were a lot of changes that happened that people were uneasy about. Just having the conversation, I think it was uncomfortable for a lot of people, but I think everybody did really good, and it just didn't really change our business at all, which was huge going into like our August and September were really strong. So I felt good about it.
What's your take on all of these changes? What's like the biggest obstacle, and what do you think some of the positives are that come out of this? Because I can see both sides. There's things I don't like, but there are things I definitely do like. Would you say these changes were overall positive, overall negative, or it's about the same? And what are those differences that you see that you think are positive and or negative?
So for me, I feel like there's pros and cons to it. I think that now you have to educate buyers a lot more, which I think a lot of agents didn't do. So from a place of education and transparency, it's really good to be able to like explain to the buyers the process and who does what and how we get paid and what our job is. The negative to that is that going right into buyer's agreements with people that you may not know. I think that, as we know, not all agents are created equal. So I've seen a lot of people unfortunately get stuck in buyer's agreements for 180 days with agents that are just not working for them. I do think that buyers should have the opportunity to, interview agents and feel confident in the people that you choose. So I feel like that is one negative. I also think that there's a lot of uneducated realtors in this whole process. I don't think that everybody is teaching their people, everything that maybe you guys are as well. So I feel like we've had a lot of uneducated problems there.
Real quick, backing up, what did you mean buyers should be able to interview other agents?
So a lot of people are going first meeting, people are just having them sign exclusive agreements.
Oh, okay.
And then people are stuck in these agreements and not entirely sure how to get to them. And I feel like that's a negative for buyers, because if they don't, if they didn't do their research prior and they just sign something not knowing about it, and then they realize that person's not sending them houses or they're not working on their behalf and not educating them like they should be. And then they're stuck with that person for 180 days, or whatever their agreement says.
Yeah. I wonder if time will help fix that as the consumer gets educated, like, hey, when you request a private showing, they're going to ask you to sign a contract. Therefore, interview first before you fall in love with a house, which is going to be a whole different mindset, right? That's going to be way different. In the past, it was always like, I see the house. I'm interested. I want to see it. And then you somewhere later have a conversation about, representation and, here's how it works.
Yeah. Did you guys hear that Colorado, though, it trumped that? It basically said we're not doing the buyer's agent's agreements prior or on the first showing because they don't think that's what's best for the buyer. And
no, I didn't.
Trump's NAR.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
No.
So I wonder how many states are going to follow that, because it's not necessarily what's best for the buyer. It saves us a lot of heartache if they're already working with somebody. And it also, especially with me and online leads, a lot of people just use us if they're realtors out of town. And so it's cleared up a lot of that type of stuff. But at the same time, is it what's best for that person? What if they meet somebody that is a way better fit? It's kind of, it's a pro and a con. I get that people should be committed, especially in the world of everything is an instant click. But at the same time, is it really what's best for the buyer if they didn't have the opportunity to interview multiple agents?
I've wondered, and I don't know if there's been enough data yet, but I wondered if this was going to make open houses so much busier and so much more important, because they are the one place where buyers can go with no commitment to see houses now. Whereas before, they might have enjoyed no, I just want to see it by myself. I'll just call a realtor or any realtor. I'll click, go see it on Zillow or whatever. There was a lot of options for a low commitment private viewing of the home. Now that's a thing of the past. So if you really want to see a home, but you're not ready to sign an agreement, or you don't want to sign an agreement, you just want to window shop, you can go to open houses. So you would think there would be an uptick in activity there.
There's a lot of people that are doing it at open houses. They're making people sign agreements at open houses because that's where like the uneducated realtors comes into place, where you don't need to, but there's so many agents that think you do.
Yeah, that's
so
crazy.
much bad information out there.
Yeah. Some of that bad information is going to shake out. It's going to shake out. First of all, the realtors are going to learn. It's going to start there. Then they're going to do transactions. Those people are going to talk to their friends, the people in the transactions, as well as the realtors. And the true information will cycle out there. We're just so new in this.
Yeah. And there wasn't a ton of information before.
The disconnect is anytime someone needs to do something in an absolute hurry, like it's a photo finish, nothing is ever really as explained as possible. And when someone says, hey, that house came on the market, I want to go see it. Well, first you have to now prove your worth to the buyer, and then you have to explain the process, and then you have to get the buyer rep signed. And unfortunately, you have to do it all before you can show the house. You don't have the grace of meeting a week before and going through all that. You have to do it right then. And look, I don't know about you guys, but I'm not really excited for someone to do a 10-minute crash course and then say, hey, sign all this stuff. I probably won't do it. And so what I've told our brokers is, gosh, prove your worth, prove your value, explain what we're doing here. But if all else fails, just say, hey, look, if I show you the house without this signed and I get audited, I can be fined up to $5,000. And there is 0% chance I'm going to show you that without something. And that's not my lead in or my go-to, but sometimes you don't have the time to really explain it. And I think a lot of these brokers aren't explaining it well. And Brittany, you said something about education that I think goes both ways. I don't think our sellers are being educated as well either. I think you have a listing agent and says, hey, you know what? My commission's X, and it's kind of half of what they're expecting potentially. And they have no conversation about, hey, most likely a buyer's going to come from a different realtor and that person's going to have a BAC. And they don't explain any of that. It's just kind of like the offer comes in and then it's like, oh, this buyer requested that you paid their agent to alleviate their contract. And if that's the first time they're understanding this process, that is way, way, way too late in the game. And I am finding that sometimes I have to educate realtors before I can negotiate with them. I had to do it the other day. And I was as nice as could be, but I just kept saying, hey, this is a condition to this offer that your seller pay me this. And he says, well, no, it's the seller agreed to X. And I'm like, you need to listen, hang on. And I couldn't get it out. And so I said, hey, 2 minutes, no talkie. I'm just gonna say it in 2 minutes. Please just listen without interrupting me. And I kind of went through it, and they said, oh, okay, that makes sense. I've never had it explained to me that way. And of course, the sellers did pay what the buyers owed me. But I think there's a lot of education that isn't happening both on the buyer side and the seller side. And I don't think all the realtors understand it fully either.
I want to speak to that because the way I see it, there's 3 camps of realtors out there. Okay. Technically there's 2, but there's a third. The third is the sky is falling. Oh my God. And run for the hills and put your head in the sand and freak out. That's the third. Okay. Everything's horrible. The other 2, the second is, let's still do it the same way as we always did. We just can't have the MLS say the BAC. Okay. So we're still going to have a BAC. We're still going to call and ask what the BAC is. And by the way, I feel like over time that one's going to fade away. But in the early days of this, there was a huge rumblings. I mean, we even had a text thread, Joe, of a great agent that we kind of went into this with, on a little group chat. A great agent, top 50 agent that was, I perceived he was struggling with this. He wanted it to be the same way. He wanted to figure out how to keep it exactly the same way, only with no BAC on the MLS. And then the first camp in the right camp is, hey, this is a new world. Okay. The commissions are decoupled. Listing agents are going to go get their commission, negotiate their commission with their seller. And then when an offer comes in, it's going to most likely ask for a commission. And the seller has every right to respond and do whatever makes sense at that time based on what is happening on the dynamics of the transaction, how long they've been on the market, on and on and on. And I've been telling my sellers, do you know why this is so good for you? It used to be that you had to bet on the game before the game starts. Now you get to bet on the game in the fourth quarter. Okay. It's fourth quarter. You're on the market. You don't have 5 offers coming at you, and you have an agent asking for, their commission out of the proceeds. Hey, great. Do it. No brainer. Maybe that's one scenario. Maybe you've been on the market 90 days in that scenario. The other scenario, the other side of the equation is you hit the market. Maybe you do have 5 offers. And maybe you do feel like, hey, I should not have to pay this commission out of my proceeds. I'm happy to let somebody build it on top of what my ask price was. So they have more levers to pull based on what's happening in the fourth quarter of their listing being live. In the past, they agreed upfront to pay a buyer's agent regardless of what was going to happen later or when it was going to happen. So I think that part's good for sellers. And I think that was the intent of this. And Camp 2, I think, is just fighting that so much. They still want to do it that way. And that's not the reality.
I see it all the time where people are sending out emails, what buyer's agent commission is, and people calling on our listings and being like, what are you offering for buyer's agent commission? And I'm like, well, my clients are prepared to pay a commission, write an offer, let us know. Because the truth is, it's the seller's choice in the agreement. So it's like the group 2 that you're talking about, they're pasting it everywhere. But at the end of the day, if somebody comes in and you have 2 offers and somebody uses what you put on your email and then another person uses, say, 1.5%, who's the seller going to choose? And are you going to get in trouble because technically you didn't tell the other agent, like it's negotiable? I don't know. I just feel like we should be having conversations about it. We should be putting it in our offers and presenting it to our sellers as a bottom line.
Why would you put out there what your seller is willing to pay when you don't know what that buyer's agent negotiated with their buyer? What if they got 2 bananas and you're offering 3? Why would you do that? That would be the equivalent of going into RMLS in the old days and in the private remarks going, hey, I know we're priced at 600, but I think my seller would take 580. Why would you do that? Or maybe put it in the public remarks, whatever, either or.
And we don't have a contract that actually gives us permission to give that percentage. Like legally, we should not be like, I don't know about you, but the last time I checked ORF forms or OR forms, that BAC is no longer in the contract.
Yeah.
We are not like, that's some liability to quote a BAC. And so I would say, let's look at the terms of the offer. Let's look at the tone and the training of that broker. Present it to the seller and let the seller decide. So when people are calling me asking about BAC, I'm like, seller is open to paying a BAC. Bring me your best offer and let's see what we can do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that brings up a good point, because we've all seen the jokes like we can't post BAC in RMLS, which means we can't put it in the notes if we have a regular open house or a broker's open house. It can't be tied to RMLS at all.
Or one click away.
It could be everywhere else, right? So we just got a bunch of these courtesy to buyer brokers signs, and you can post it on social media everywhere. And I'm thinking about it, and it's like, what does it matter, right? It's like, at this point, if you have a sign that says courtesy to brokers, you're the listing agent. So it's up to the selling agent to come with a buyer rep agreement. And then dependent upon the price and dependent upon what they're asking, it all negotiates. I don't know that all of the brokers are really bending over backwards, advertising it on every flyer and on the sign and on social media, because we know that it's a mandatory thing that broker is going to come with a BAC with proof by providing their buyer rep agreement if they want to provide it. And I don't know that we have to say courtesy to broker. If it's all negotiable at the time of the offer, then what does it matter? I mean, do you guys advertise like crazy everywhere but RMLS?
No, I don't. I don't say anything other than verbalizing what your sign says, Joe. I mean, in to some component, our seller is very buyer agent friendly. Make your offer and request what your contract is states, and let's try to find a deal that can be had. Plain and simple.
Have you faced sellers who are like, "Hey, we don't have to pay the BAC anymore because of the lawsuit, so I want to list my house and we don't have to pay that buyer"? Have you had that? And if so, how do you respond to that?
So we for sure had it, because I think that, that's what, I mean, any news channel or anything, they're like, the 6% is gone. We're, all of these different types of things. But when they come and they're like, we don't have to pay the buyer's agent anymore. And I'm like, well, if you do that, you're going to cut out a whole section of first time home buyers and or just buyers just in general. Like with the interest rates high and closing costs and a down payment and prices being high, there's a good chance they don't have enough money to be able to actually also pay their agent. And so you're going to be cutting out all of those people. And, I think you'd be shooting yourself in the foot. And so once you explain all of it, they tend to be a lot more open to it. And they don't want to not pay a buyer's agent or pay somebody for their time. I do think that the sellers are honestly making it out a little bit better. I don't know about you guys, but we list quite a bit of properties, and every single time we list it, people aren't really asking for for a full commission. And it's like, there's no communication or anything like that. People are just kind of cutting themselves short. And that's probably a little bit like, I've kind of done the opposite a little bit. I've been asking for a little bit more because I feel,
same.
And it's like.
And my listing commissions are higher too.
Yeah. Give yourself a raise. It's an opportunity.
Yeah. I took a raise. I rounded up.
I gave this girl 2 thumbs a raise too.
I didn't need a decimal point in what I was quoting.
Yeah, because I do think that people are going to start to realize that there are certain agents that you're going to have to walk and train through the entire process. And then there are other agents where it's like, that agent's going to close it because they know what they're doing. They're educating their buyers up front, and it's going to be a smoother transaction. So I've made more, but a lot of agents just aren't even asking for the commissions, and it's working out really good for our sellers. So
I think it's an education piece, right? Yes, I've had sellers who are like, oh, we don't have to pay this anymore. I'm like, well, I don't know about you, but when I go fishing, I need some bait on that hook to catch some fish, right? I just explain, like, this is what we need to do in order to make it more desirable for a buyer to want to see your house and write an offer on it. And once you educate them on what's happening, it's a very simple conversation. And, back to your question, Joe, of this new world of compensation, I think one, it allows us to skill up. I'm always looking for opportunities to learn more, but it's for the average broker, it's an opportunity to skill up. It's an opportunity to see your value and bring that to the table. And so on the listing side, yes, I gave myself a raise because I know I'm going to have to be educating a lot of people on the other side that didn't take the time to train and level up. I think education across the industry is going to get better, but I highly recommend that somebody at the average agent have their listing presentation down pat that covers all of this, and their buyer's presentation down pat that covers all of this, so that they can advocate for themselves and for their client. And, we have a fiduciary to our clients. What is the best for our clients? Not our pocketbook, but what is really the best for them? And if we are not educating them and telling them the process and how compensation works and the decoupling, we are doing them a disservice on the fiduciary. So I think it's a great opportunity to just change and do better in our industry.
Absolutely. And Brittany, back to your scenario. I mean, every seller says that until they're on the market for 3 weeks with no offers, and everything goes out the window, and they're like, "Well, wait a minute, bring me an offer. What do you guys want?" And at the end of the day, the part I think it's going to be really, really rare. Now, there will be some jerk seller out there that hates realtors and does this, but it's going to be really rare where an offer comes in and the seller with a request for commissions, and you can't convince the seller, like, hey, even if you have a number you want to net, let's just add that on top and counter that to them. Even if it's above asking price. Hey, and yes, we understand appraisals could be an issue, but we've been doing that for years with seller concessions and buy downs and other stuff. So this isn't uncharted territory. For years, if you were working, say, with a VA buyer and they needed all their closing costs up front, so you're looking at houses and you're offering, full price, but we need $10,000, right, for closing costs because my VA buyer doesn't have his closing costs. If there was any pushback from the seller, go, okay, let's just counter and put it on top and cross our fingers and hope it appraises, which is a scenario. I'm not trying to poo-poo that, like, no big deal. But in the environment we're in, and we're fortunate to be in this environment and not the COVID environment, that may come again someday, some super hot market, and there will be, challenges that we're not discussing here because the dynamics will be different in general. But for now, a lot of what I'm seeing and hearing, and it sounds like you guys are saying the same, it's business as usual, right? In fact, there's tailwinds on listing commissions. To your point, Joe, you articulated this, and it's not that we're doing it in a nefarious or deceptive way, but it sure feels good to quote that commission rate that we're quoting now, because it's a lot lower than what we've been quoting on our entire lives.
Right. That's right.
So, and I am educating my sellers. I am saying, like, look, this is good news for you. The commission's been broken up. You can bet in the fourth quarter instead of betting before the game starts on what you're going to pay the buyer's agent and how it's going to go down. For now, all you have to do is agree to pay my commission, and it's this, and that number feels good to quote. So it is a prime opportunity to have some tailwinds and give yourself a raise on that. And then on the buyer side, I like we said, we're holding a number that we feel is our value, and we're getting it. I mean, if we're not getting it, we're knowing up front, and those aren't our buyers. That's okay.
Well, what's interesting is I had a conversation just on what you talked about with some appraisers. And if you have this offer and then all of a sudden, magically, the offer is the price is raised to what would equal exactly a BAC for the seller who doesn't necessarily want to pay it, the appraisers are having a difficult time because even though you don't say anything, they know what's going on. And so at least in the short term, if you could have that tough conversation with the seller in advance and say, hey, look, why don't we offer this instead of hold out, not decide to offer, and then raise the price, the amount of the BAC for you to pay it, that's going to be a red flag for the appraisers. And I mean, that really is something to consider. And then,
has anybody had an appraisal issue on something with commissions? I haven't either. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
It's been...
That'd be a good question for masters, by the way.
August 17th. I mean, we haven't had...
Yeah, there hasn't been a lot of... Yeah, I know. I have a question for you too. Are you, when you're talking to your sellers, are you quoting two commissions? One if there's another agent, one if there's an unrepresented buyer?
No, I don't want to do an unrepresented buyer anymore.
Okay.
I'll refer it out. I know that maybe is I just feel like at least in my experience, it never ends well. And I believe if I have a fiduciary duty to my seller client, how could I possibly to the buyer?
Even with team members where a different team member is representing?
The principal broker. And unfortunately, I still have access to all of that stuff. So if anything ever shook out, I just feel like I would have a hard time saying one way or another.
But I could jujitsu that on you though a little bit, Brittany.
I know you probably could. Jitsu, let's see it.
What I mean is, what if there's a buyer that really wants that house, but they just don't want to pay commissions and they want to go straight to the seller? If you put a roadblock up and go, no, I can't do this for you, you can go and you're referring them, they're like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to pay that commission. Couldn't they go to find another house? And now you did hurt your seller?
This is where I feel on that, at least, but my sellers, I've been prepping my sellers to pay a buyer's agent commission. So I haven't had that.
No, but I'm not talking about for the seller's vantage point. I'm talking about the buyers. If I feel like there are going to be buyers out there that are savvy, most likely, and hopefully, that are like, I don't need a buyer's agent. I'm going to find the house. I want to go see it, maybe at an open house, or call the listing agent, which I think we're feeling a little uptick of on my team. And if that house works for us, great. We're going to go straight through them and be an unrepresented buyer. And I get your for years and decades. I know where you're coming from, but I wonder if this isn't changing the landscape a little bit, where we'd be harming our sellers if we didn't have a mechanism in our organization, and maybe that's a team, where we accommodate that somehow.
Well, those transactions, Steve, always end up looking like a murder scene.
I don't necessarily agree with it.
The person that says, I'm not using a realtor, so I need this much money off of the price. But they're expecting you to provide all the forms and do all the work. There are two realtors. It happens to be one person, but there are two realtors. So I am not a fan of dual representation, and I won't do it if I can get away with it. And, you have a buyer and a seller, and it's difficult because your fiduciary responsibility with your seller, who was your first client, diminishes if you also represent the buyer. Now you're Switzerland, you can't give any specific recommendations. I don't want to. And I would rather, if I deal with the unrepresented buyer, I'm happy to write the deal and provide the forms. I'm not going to represent them, but I could be the same broker on both sides of it, but not for the guy that says, hey, we're unrepresented, we want to save all this money. You write it up. You want to sell the house for your seller, don't you? I don't do that. I can smell that from a mile away. It will never happen.
And you could go to another broker and then not take the full commission because you found the house and because you know what you want to offer.
But now that buyer has to sign a contract with them. And I know it can be a contract just for that house, or, it can have caveats that they're not really in a contract. But now they would have to sign a contract with a dollar figure that they are on the hook for. Even if they're getting it from the seller, they're paying that. And I just feel like you're going to get friction there.
There is a great solution, though, to those people. And I'm like, well, don't buy it.
Well, then you're harming your seller.
No, you're not necessarily.
I disagree with that, actually. So if a seller is hiring me with their hard-earned money, like I'm all in on that fiduciary with them, it feels icky to me for them to hire me with their hard-earned money and then say, oh, and by the way, this person wants me to write the offer and now I'm negotiating against you, but you're actually paying me. That I don't do icky, and that feels icky to me. So when I sit down and talk to sellers in that listing presentation, I'm saying, it's my personal policy. I don't do dual agency. Let me explain what that means. And I say exactly what I just told you. And then I say, if there's a buyer that comes in that's unrepresented and wants me to be involved, I have a fiduciary duty to you. I need to do what's best for you. And how do you feel about this situation? I want to flush all that out up front so that when we come to that bridge, it's just very easy to cross over and be like, oh, this looks like a free kick to the head. And guess what? None of us want a free kick to the head. So we're going to back it up. They can go find a broker. They can not buy the house. They can figure something out, but that's not my seller's problem. And that's not my problem. So
you're exactly right. And it's not, look, if a buyer wants a house, hasn't signed an agreement and says, well, gosh, we don't have a broker, could you write up the deal? Unrepresented, I would. But the people that come specifically like, I have to write an offer through the listing agent so I could save what would be the BAC. And it goes to the old, cliche. Don't wrestle with a pig. You'll get muddy, you'll lose, and the pig likes it. And it's like, you're not doing a disservice to your seller. You are saving them by tearing up their ticket to the shit show that they would go through if they went with this, I want to save the commission off the price people. None of them ever worked out well, ever.
It doesn't.
I don't know. I disagree with that, Joe. I've directly represented. I have a team. There's two people involved, and I understand that I'm the head of the tip of the spear, but we put a firewall between them, and I understand. I guess I'm not here to debate this with you on the rules of 2023 and prior. There was a monumental shift this year in how business is done, and I'm wondering if it's going to affect that as well. And I will also say this, in commercial real estate, it's happened for decades. They find the win-win. They a lot of times, for confidentiality purposes, they actually only do it that way. Like if somebody's going to buy a business, they don't want to share all the details with a third party agent. They want to sign the buyer to sign an NDA and look at the books. It's also been done for decades in property management. A renter will call up a landlord or a management company, and they're representing the seller, and they help them rent the house out. I know there's a couple other small differences there, but my point is, this lawsuit was not about that. It was about saving commissions, and that was where all the pressure was on our industry, is squishing down commissions. If this indeed can squish down commissions, and the masses are wanting that, I think you're going to find yourselves fighting a battle like camp number 2 at some point, if you don't find the right way to maybe facilitate that. That's my prediction. And I could be wrong, but I don't know. I know it's just different.
What I don't want to see is, being decoupling, being transparent. We reverse engineered 3 steps. And at the time of the offer, we go 3 steps forward to kind of get back to where we were, right? It's just a little bit more work, which is evidently more transparent. And it's like, I don't want the general public, buyers and sellers, thinking, well, everyone knows that commissions are negotiable. I don't want them thinking, hey, the crawl space has mold, and the mold remediation is going to cost $2,700. If you realtors want this deal to go through, the commissions are negotiable. Reduce yours. And it's like when we sell a home to someone and 5 years later, they're selling and doubling it. We don't participate in all of that equity we got them. Or when times are bad and people are taking a loss, we don't participate in that either. We're the tool and the means to sell these things. So I don't want them to bridge the gap and think anytime there's a negotiation, we're going to go after commissions, because that's not why we're here.
We've seen that a ton, where we're trying to get a repair addendum done, and then somebody comes back and they lower the commission $1,000 or $2,000 to pay for the repairs. And it's hard to get past that, because that's what people are. That's the first thing, now that it's negotiable in the contract. That's the first thing that's going when you're starting to negotiate, and that's pretty frustrating.
Those are weak agents, first of all, and they're the ones that should be freaking out.
Yeah,
they are the ones that should be freaking out, because they're going to find themselves in a bad spot. I mean, you can only give up so much of your proceeds before you're running an insolvent business that doesn't work.
Mm-mm.
Well, and it's an education piece, right? When you're presenting that buyer broker agreement, when you're at a listing appointment, commission is commission. It is not part of the negotiations of the deal.
Yeah, it's a different bank account. Exactly.
And if we're not discussing that, okay, well, then you might find yourself in that situation. But if you're educating your clients on it and like, hey, this is this, and separate bank accounts, they don't cross over, then you're in a better situation.
Yeah.
Two of the big positives, I think, that came out of this is, too many hobbyists, realtors, like, hey, I'm a hairstylist and I got my license, and when I sell more real estate than that, I'm going to switch my side hustle to my main hustle, and it never really happens, because this isn't a good part-time job for someone who isn't on the downside of like retirement, right? If this is your only career, it's a full-time job. And we now have to prove our worth and sell ourselves and do a lot of education and explaining to buyers, which never had to be done before to buyers, only the sellers. I think the second positive is we all know that someone wants to sell their house and all their friends are saying, hey, interview 3 realtors or interview a handful of realtors. And usually there's some person there that whatever you quote on price, their quote is 50 grand more. And whatever you quote on commission, theirs is, a percentage less. And whoever has the highest price and lowest commission wins. Well, when we're out showing our buyers, we're showing houses every weekend. And let's say, it's almost a $2 million buyer. Don't you hate it when your buyers say, hey, we're kind of interested in this house. And then back in the day, you'd look at the BAC and it was much lower than competitive. I'm not breaking antitrust laws. I'm not saying blackball them. I'm not saying anything, but I can say, weren't you a little disappointed after showing for 4 months and you see the BAC was less than competitive in your own opinion? Now we can do something about it. We can actually kind of control what our commission is. And so the guy who's just trying to snipe listings with too high a price and too low a commission, we could still prove our worth and still negotiate our own commission with our buyer that then gets transferred to the seller potentially. I think those are 2 very positive reasons. And the third reason is the people who aren't in it to win it aren't in the business, or a lot of them have kind of fallen out, which ups our whole professionalism moving forward.
I'll tell you another positive. In the old world that we used to live in, there was a free pot of money on every house, in every house, that was going to go to a buyer's agent, regardless of who found the house, who wanted it, whatever the situation was. And it was a preset amount. So a lot of times we've all experienced this. I mean, we work with a big local builder developer. They would come to the open house. We would tour them around the subdivision. We would educate them on everything possible. We would go through what was being offered, amenities, offerings. They would fall in love with something. They would never mention any agent. And then next thing we know, an agent calls and goes, hey, I'd like to represent him on this purchase. Okay. Do you know why they were doing that? Because it was a free pot of money there. There was a free pot of money. It was preset. If those people, the mindset and the reality of the situation was, if those people had worked with us directly, then we would have got that little free pot of money. And so they anointed somebody in their world. There was somebody in their orbit, whether it was a friend, relative, neighbor, whatever. Hey, you get the free pot of money. I found the house. It's all figured out. You just you get it. Those days are gone. There is no free pot of money. If in that same scenario, if the buyer goes and gets that friend's going to want him to sign something and there's going to be money on it. And to your point, Joe, and I'm exactly in agreement with you, that is going to hurt some of the weaker, newer people in the business. And it's going to be a barrier of entry. It's going to raise the bar of entry to get into this business, because when you get into it, you can't just go run to all your friends and go, hey, I want the free pot of money when you're ready to buy a house. They're going to go, no. I'm going to pay an agent. What's your qualifications? Should I pay you? How much am I going to pay you? It's going to get tougher for them.
You know who wins on this is the way, you're not supposed to name real estate companies, but this is a fact. The Redfin agents, they get a lead and they accept it, and then they go show a house. And in the past, a lot of brokers are like, I'm in Mexico. Just have a Redfin agent, show the house for you. And then if you want to buy it, I'll write it up. I mean, they have the most to win on this for A, not wasting their time, and B, getting their buyer rep agreement signed. I'm not a fan of anyone's time getting wasted. If someone wants to buy a house through me, call me. I'll either be there or have someone be there for you. I wouldn't want you to ever call the listing agent or some other person just to unlock the door to come back to me. That's bad juju. I don't want that hanging over my head.
We get a lot of leads like that. And that's been one really positive thing, because we'll be like, here, sign this. They're like, no, I have an agent. They told me to call Zillow because they're out of town. I was like, no, I can't show you the house.
Brittany, are you still doing a lot with Zillow?
Yeah.
I threw the talent on Zillow like 2.5 years ago, so I can't speak to Zillow. How's that working? Walk us through that.
I mean, it's interesting because there are a lot of people, just like, you had a Zillow account for a long time. And
long time.
There are a lot of people that have agents. And I used to be okay with them because I'm like, why are you calling Zillow if you have an agent? Like, why are you not texting this house to your agent? And what you realize is there's a lot of agents that don't answer. They don't want to show the house. They don't want to do all of these different types of things. And so then it makes them think a little bit like, this person's not doing their job. And we would, they would end up using us in the long run anyways. But it has made it a little bit harder because there are a lot of people that are like, well, I don't really know you. I don't want to sign anything.
Walk us through this process. I know they have a touring sheet, right? Where 7 days.
We do not use it.
Okay, so what is happening with Zillow lead? You get the call, right? It's a direct call when there's a Zillow lead. You talk to them. Give us the average scenario, like kind of the timelines.
So for us, and this is something that maybe I'll get a lot of flack for, but all of our Zillow leads sign a non-exclusive because I don't think it's fair. And I've explained that to people. I'm like, they don't know you. You have to earn their trust, earn their relationship. So you need to go in, have them sign a non-exclusive relationship and tell them.
At the house?
No, we have this conversation up front.
You docu-signed it to them before the showing?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a contract, but does it have terms?
Yeah, we have a 90 days, non-exclusive.
But they can get out of it at any point, or they can go work with someone at any point?
Yep. Yeah. And so we had it all written up. We sent it to PMAR. We sent it to our MLS. We sent it to our lawyer. And it has all the qualifications that are needed, but it's basically just a non-exclusive.
Does it say the dollar amount?
Mm-hmm. In the event that you decide to use us, this is our, what we'd like to be paid. So with that, then we explain to people like, hey, this is how the new laws are. You're going to have to sign something no matter what. We do a non-exclusive because we feel like you should have the opportunity to choose your agent. We would love the opportunity to represent you and all this different. When they start being more consistent and they are using you, you're showing them houses every weekend, you're writing offers for them, we absolutely go into an exclusive. But when you're going in, it's just like it's the same idea of the touring agreement where it's like you are not required to use this person.
Yeah.
It just has the right qualifications. What we realize is that 7-day touring agreement doesn't really have what it takes to be legal. And there's a lot of gray area, and ours is just super simple and meets all the requirements and check marks. But for us, we just went non-exclusive and we just educate people because we talk to so many new people every single day that people will tend to come back. Yeah, that person tried to get me to sign a 6-month exclusive agreement. I didn't even know who they were. And then all of a sudden they start to really question what they're signing and all that different type of stuff. So I think it's been really good. It's kept a lot more buyers in our grasp.
I knew it was going to be a wrinkle for Zillow leads and people, in the Zillow program because Zillow benefited from that. There's a free pot of money in every house. Hey, no commitment, click a button, somebody meets you there. That person's there because of the free pot of money. And that's now all, changed. So I knew it was going to be trickier. Yeah. Interesting.
It hasn't really gone down for us yet. I feel like it's once again, just coming at the point of education. A lot of people don't understand how we get paid. And it's just been, educating buyers on that. But yeah, there's a lot of people that have, Zillow contracts and stuff, and they're having people sign exclusives like right off the bat. And then people come to us, they're like, how do we get out of them? I'm like, we can't tell you. Like, you're just going to get your agreement and figure it out. You can't use anybody else until you figure that out.
I don't think that's controversial. I'm not going to throw shade on you for doing non-binding contracts. I mean, I think it's dumb that we get thrust into doing this so quickly. Like if someone wants to see a house, we have to have it signed. That's not enough time. What you're doing is you're introducing the opportunity to build that relationship, show your worth over time, make a profile for them.
Technically, I don't want people to sign an agreement. I want you to choose to work with me.
Exactly.
You don't want to work with me. You don't vibe. We probably aren't going to have fun the next 3 months. And I'm fun.
Yeah. But I couldn't imagine you have a consultation with a doctor, and it's like, okay, sign this. Just sign right here. It says I'm your doctor for the next year. I mean, it's like, I don't even know you. It's like, are you kidding? So to build that relationship and rapport and nurture that, I think it's smart. And I know some of the other people are like, no, it has to have teeth and rah, rah, rah. There are a lot of people that do get buyers who are uneducated, who sign binding contracts. And they're like, I am stuck with this person who I can never reach on the phone, rarely by email, once in a while by text. I don't want to be with this person. And they should have something like, you could terminate it, and then as long as you have a new relationship with another realtor. But I think it's good that you do that.
Well, I don't know who's enforcing those, but at the end of the day, if you were to go to arbitration or court or whatever you go to try to get that commission, and you can prove that agent was never working for you and never answering your calls or doing their job, and the things that they lined out that they were going to do in their buyer's agreements, who is going to award that agent money for doing nothing?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's my opinion. It's like, I and a lot of people are going to, they're going to see this as an opportunity that, like, I've got these 50 people and I'm just going to grab my commission because they signed my contract. But the truth is, who's going to enforce that if you really are not doing a good job?
Mm-hmm.
Brittany, I think it's amazing. I love the time and effort that you put into, like, okay, this Zillow contract's not working. I'm going to make my own, and I'm going to make it so it aligns with my moral code and what feels right for my clients. Like, huge. And how inspiring for anybody who's listening to realize, like, you can make it work with, like, what feels right to you. I love the idea of the non-exclusive for, like, I mean, I don't know about you, but, like, I sure didn't kiss on the first date. I'm like, I got to feel you out, dude. I got to see, like, is this the right fit or not? Like, don't be trying to kiss me on the porch. Like, maybe the second date, but, like,
love that analogy.
No. So if somebody's coming at me like, oh yeah, you got to sign this contract. I know we just met and we had coffee. Well, I don't drink coffee, tea, right? Like, I'm going to be like, I'm not quite sure yet. Like, you may put on a good front, but, like, I got to see, like, you earning it. And so I love what you're promoting with your team and what you're teaching, Brittany. I think that's awesome. Love it.
Yeah, I have no issues per se with that. I mean, it's basically it's a way to do it the way it's always been done. Because then you show them a house, they can buy it with you, they can not buy it with you. They could go find someone else to buy it with. They can do it at your commission that you put on there. They could not do it with your commission on there. So I mean, it is a way to do it the way it was done before. We've gotten creative with our buyer contracts where somebody calls us and they want to see a house, and we go, hey, well, we do have to have a contract. The great news, one of the great positives of this entire thing is most buyers, if they don't all know it now, they will in a year. They know that there has to be a contract, and so it's an easy conversation. Sometimes they even bring it up, and we've gotten creative where we just do the contract for just that address, or we do it for 7 days, or a goal. We all have the healthy goal of getting a real contract, but to your guys' point, it's not always conducive to do that immediately. Sometimes you have to date a little bit before you get married, right? Or to use your analogy, Heather.
I will tell you, I'm married for 25 years. Dustin, on our first date, he didn't even come on the porch. He was like, all right, well, good night. And then I was like, wait, okay. And then he, like, dated me. Like, we became good friends. And I think his approach is the good approach of, like, man, don't go in for the kill the first date. Like, the non-exclusive or for the address that you're showing them, like, let's earn their business. Let's serve them all the way through when we first meet them and all the way through past closing. Like, really show our value. I think that's how you're going to continue to earn their business and their referrals.
The advantage of the address, I will say this, I'm not trying to convince you, Brittany. I'm just going to point out an obvious that I'm realizing. The advantage of putting an address with a commission is if you go show that one house and they love it and they want to buy it, you're going to get paid, and you're going to get paid your commission. If you have a non-exclusive and you go show them that house, they can leave there and they can call someone else, and and that makes it more like the old world, right? Which was icky at times for us. So,
what if they want to see the house down the street, though? You have to try to do the contract on the way to the next house.
Oh yeah.
No, I understand, and that's the downside of putting an address. Maybe a day, maybe put one day, one afternoon.
Yeah.
Or 3 days. Yeah. Yeah.
And to all of our listeners and subscribers, the Portland Real Estate Podcast is the only podcast that talks about buyer rep agreements and your own sexual timeline with dating new people. I haven't heard that, and I listen to lots of podcasts and lots of shows. So I think, what's this? No one buys the cow when you have
milk for free.
No one buys milk when you have a cow at home, or whatever that thing is. So don't have sex on the first date. That's and get your buyer rep signed with a good relationship.
Clarification, I said kiss.
Nobody buys the milk when the cow kisses on the first date, I think is how it goes. I think that's how it goes. Well, here's a con in this whole thing. I know we've talked about, pros, and there's a lot of pros. One of the cons that we felt right away is there is now more paperwork up front, and it's urgent paperwork. And that has been a difference. And we quickly, in my world, on my team, had to facilitate that. We had to come up with some systems where any of our agents can quickly fire off a template email, and a TC creates a buyer rep agreement and fires it off to them. They approve it and then get it, sent out and signed and everything. In the past, we used buyer contracts, but usually it wasn't urgent. If a client called you and said, "Hey, I want to see it. Hey, Steve, you haven't heard from me in 5 years. You helped us buy our house. We want to see the house next, across town. It just came on the market. We found it on Zillow. We want to see it." In the past, we usually would just go show the house. And then if things got some legs and they are a buyer, then we talk about an agreement or something. It's same with listings. In the past, if we went to a seller's house, we would do a listing appointment. Whether they said it there or later, they want a contract. Usually there wasn't a lot of urgency to the contract because it's like we're doing photos immediately and incurring costs and expenses. So there was a few days. We are on the regular now seeing scenarios where we need buyer agreements within hours, right? And so that's been kind of a big adaptation that we're feeling in our world.
I agree with that. And another thing I thought of, sort of back to the dual representation. So the four of us are all company owners, right? And we all understand the amount of liability is there if you represent a seller and a buyer. And just one person has to say, I don't feel like I was represented. And then hell and fury come down on you because you're the realtor, right? To figure out if you represented both or not. And this isn't a scenario where we should ever have dual agency. If I ever have a dual agency, I'm going to refer it to one of my brokers or somebody, just because it's too many hats. And this isn't the type of profession where you can do it. So for example, I could be a doctor and I could give a husband a physical, a wife a physical, and I can't explicitly tell each other about the other's physical without written consent, right? That's above board. But imagine being a divorce attorney and then you're standing here with the soon-to-be ex-wife in court and pleading her case, and then you finish and you walk over to the soon-to-be ex-husband and plead his case. You can't have your fiduciary responsibility at the highest level at a dual agency. So one more plug for refer it to somebody. Just don't handle it yourself because it is a big red herring. If it doesn't go 100% perfect, they're going to hang you out to dry, and it's going to be a problem for you.
Great. I like what you said about a murder scene. That was quite entertaining.
Right. The old dumpster fire cliche. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like it's going to go well. So let's just avoid it altogether. Yeah.
Absolutely.
To your question about the urgency of the contracts, I think that when you have solid processes and systems in place, those templates, even the recorded videos, a loom that goes through everything that you can be able to send out with it in DocuSign, like education. I really like to get in front of my buyers well before they're even looking at houses. Has anybody taken the time to sit down with you and talk with you about the process? I would love to talk with you about the process before we even go out and start kicking tires. Let's sit down. And so we're training our brokers on systems, processes, education, and get in front of them as early as possible. Yes, of course, there's always going to be those scenarios where it's urgent and it's a couple hours and we need to make it happen. I like to slow those situations down if possible, because that's when we're going to get into a sticky situation, is when it's rushed and it's not done well, or it's not, you haven't taken the time to educate the client. So education, systems, processes, all of those are key. And, your team has got them. Brittany, your team has got them. Joe, you're out there training your brokerage as well. And at Robbins Realty Group, we're doing the same. And so when you have those, like, we don't rise to our habits, we fall to our systems and processes, right? When we're crunch, when we're stressed out. And so just making sure those systems and processes are in place and that they're trained really well on it. They should know their buyer presentation like the back of their hand, like they know their listing presentation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm gonna record that 60 seconds of what you said, and I'm gonna play it on a loop in the office. I mean, yes. Steve and I are we're so fortunate that we have, two brilliant company owners who do lots of business. And so I don't want to talk for everyone, but don't you think the underlying theme of this is taking the time to educate people and do it slowly over time and let the buyer fully understand and the seller fully understand? Don't you think if you could at least master that, then everything else should fall into place? And I think that's the fall down, is that people aren't educating.
Yeah. Education and communication, I think, is the biggest thing for real estate in general. Like, I feel like so many people don't communicate what is happening or communicating to other realtors or anything like that. It's just like education and communication should be your primary thing in real estate.
Do you feel, I feel like the strong realtors are going to get stronger and the weak realtors are going to get weaker. Do you guys?
It's already happening.
Yeah. Some of that is because of their confidence. Most of that is because of their confidence and their perception of their value. Some of it is also their mental ability to handle change. That's another big component to this. Is I just can't believe the sky is falling chicken little that I've seen on social media, in Facebook groups and just in general around the industry, how they're making such a massive issue out of this, rather than pivoting. They're spending more energy fighting this change than they are spending that energy on navigating that change, right?
As I would say, it's definitely a mindset. And there's people who are still resisting and want it to go back. Anybody listening, we are in a new world. We are not going back. And if you cannot accept that, then maybe this isn't for you, right? Because the industry is constantly evolving. And if we can't evolve, if we can't scale up and scale up and have an open mindset, I just don't think you're going to last in this industry.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of people that are not doing the stuff, and that's scary too to think about, but
it is.
And we do have change. We have change every year in real estate. It's like you hear the cliche, hey, different BS, different year. And it's like every year there is a dramatic change. When we all got into the business, look at all the inspections you could have now, radon and black mold and asbestos, and it's just millions of them. And this is just another change. But the fact that this one really uprooted people from their comfort zone, a lot of people are struggling with this. And for me, it's in the rearview mirror. We educated our brokers. Our brokers are doing an amazing job because we're looking at, they're all getting buyer rep agreements. They're all doing everything. And that's a big testament to them. We provided all kinds of education. And in doing so, I have 60 hours on this so far this year of NAR and buyer rep stuff. And if we never discuss it again and just continue doing business, it's really too soon. But I see a lot of value in it. And this is history to me. This is the new way we do business, and we're not looking back, and I'm not going to dwell about it. And I think that's what some of the better brokers are doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, there's always opportunity and change. So let's look for the good. Let's look for the positive, for the opportunity. We've covered, like, you can skill up, you can improve your systems, your processes, you can give yourself a raise, you can educate your clients, you can have a little bit more commitment with your buyers now that you buyer rep. Like there's so many pluses to this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, 1,000%. Have you guys, how's business been for you guys? Let's pivot real quick and just talk about the market in general. I was noticing for many weeks, despite mortgage rates coming down dramatically, even prior to today. And today there was some big news from the Fed, and I would be surprised if mortgage rates don't come down a little bit more because of that, because I think mortgage rates were unsure if it was going to be a 25 basis point or a 50 basis point, because the markets were betting 50-50 that it was going to be one of the two. Now that we know it's 50, I'm expecting that we might actually get into the high fives very soon. We were really close. We were at 611 was what Mortgage News Daily gets quoted on CNBC every day that I'm watching. So, however, that said, for quite a while, we've been trending lower and getting into the low sixes, and I just wasn't seeing the spur of activity. Now, I wondered if people were waiting for today, which is the Fed day, because a lot of consumers are somewhat ignorant about how mortgage rates work, and in their mind, they might have thought, well, today the Fed's going to drop mortgage rates a big chunk, so why would I buy before then? I did, however, feel like we had a good uptick in activity last weekend. Several of our listings went pending. We had a lot of good activity at our listings. So I'm fairly optimistic that we might be actually right now turning the corner and starting to see some more activity. Do you guys have any input there?
I would say that, yeah, I'm excited about the Fed rate. I have clients, sellers, buyers who are both waiting to see what happens today. But also, if you look at, it's an election year, and 7 of the 8.
It is? Are you sure about that?
I know, right? But 7 of the last 8 elections, prices went up. The only time it didn't was in 2009. So if we're going back from like 1989 to today, like we are bound to have prices go up based on past data and the fact that they just dropped the rates. And so I've been telling my clients, like, there's a window. Like, this is such an opportunity for houses that maybe have been sitting on the market and they need a price drop. Come in, write the offer, and then maybe a longer closing to lock in that lower interest rate. So then you secure the house at that price and you get the lower interest rate. Like, a window of opportunity, snag it. And some will wait, some will not. So
yeah, and I've been saying, like, you can refi for $5,000 down the road. What if you can get the house you want now and get a big savings on it, $50,000, $30,000, a massive number. Isn't that what the smart money would do? Is get the house you want, get the big savings on it, and then once you have it secured down the road, if you need to do something different with the rates, it's $5,000.
And that's the whole marry the house, date the rate. And don't kiss on the first day.
Right. And it was good advice, but it was given too early. It was good advice. Timing is everything and everything, right? I mean, you could tell someone to buy a stock, and if you tell them that a year too soon, that they could look like a fool. And if you tell them a year too late, I mean, timing is important. That advice does work when the timing is right. When people were saying that 2 years ago, I don't know that was the best advice necessarily, but it is great advice now, because the easing has begun. I mean, we've seen it already with mortgage rates, and the Fed officialized it today with their Fed funds rate. So the easing cycle has begun, and barring any crazy surprises, will continue. It's going to continue. And this is the opposite. The first time we had you two on this podcast, we were on the other end of that, right? We were on the ups, the tightening cycle. It was beginning. Every Fed meeting, they were raising rates 0.25%, and it was painful. And we were talking about that. Like, we were just watching the rates go up, and it's going to be fun to watch them go the other direction. It's going to be good for business.
I'm nervous because I feel like prices are going to skyrocket again. I can't remember the exact number, but they said some crazy amount of new buyers are going to come into the market when the interest rates drop even 0.5 point. And it's a crazy thing to think about, because even if you think 2020, 2021, it was absolutely crazy. And then mix that in with all the commission stuff, it's going to be a really weird time. And I mean, I feel like it's been easier for people to actually negotiate and get into the house that they want. But the rates go away, or the rates go down, and it's going to be back to the frenzy.
I don't know that it's going to be 2021, Brittany.
I don't think it's going to be that crazy.
But it'll be better than 2023. And if we could have something that's in the middle of 2021 and 2023, I'll take it all day long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so in the last 2 weeks, I did notice a pretty substantial uptick. Homes that were sitting, 45 days, 55 days, like in the last 2 weeks, everything's pending. And for me, I have a lot of cash buyers, but the people that are getting a loan, once we touched 6 point something, it didn't matter at that point. They just had to like the house. The problem we're having is finding good inventory where the house isn't weird. And if it's a good inventory and they like it, the interest rate isn't going to move the needle. It's just finding that house. And that's, I'm sure that other people are like, hey, at a half a point less, now we get more house for the same payment. I mean, I'm sure more people are going to jump into the market, but I think once we got down to 6 from 8.25 in July of 2023, that was the big difference for my clientele.
Yeah. And when they got into the mid 8s, that locked everything up. So we are in such a better place.
It's so affordable. I mean, for just a normal $400,000 or $500,000 house, people are paying $3,500, $4,000 a month. That's crazy.
It was crazy.
How can anybody afford that? It's just
nuts. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I don't know if you guys saw the podcast with Rob Levy and Dirk Zeller, and they've been realtors forever. And, they said they've lived through like 4 recessions. Out of the 4 recessions, the prices only went down 1 time. The other 3 times, the prices didn't go down. Title wasn't being transferred.
Which is bad for us on this podcast, which is bad for us. Transaction count was down, but not prices. Yeah.
Transaction count was down. But when you think you're going to a recession, everyone thinks, great, I'll buy a house then and get like this smoking price. The prices only went down in 1 out of the last 4 recessions. So I see prices holding. And I think if there's a different variable, like rates get lower or inventory gets tighter, I can see prices going back up again. We do have the highest inventory we've had in minimum of the last 3 years, maybe more. I looked at a chart only 3 years, back, but we're at like 3.0 absorption rate, and the rate's normalizing a little bit better. I think our rates are going to be what they are today, if not improving a little bit through the election and whoever is POTUS the first 100 days, because that's what everybody tracks the most. So I think it is a good market. And look, we've all been in markets where rates were much higher than 5.9 or 5. What are the rates today, ballpark? What is it? Is it like
they're right around 6% even?
Okay,
yeah, real close. I haven't looked since we've been on this, and we've been on this since the Fed dropped 50 basis points. So I would expect it to go down a little bit. It was around 6.1 at that moment. I'm excited for the unlocking effect that's going to happen between those people that have the 3, 4s. Suddenly, if we get into the 5s, our phones are going to start ringing from people we have not been hearing from for a couple of years who are like, hey, I want to do something different. And that's really exciting. And that creates more transactions. I get home prices have been held pretty strong, and that's great for our clients, and when we're thrilled for them. But we make money when people move. That's what we do. And I'll be the first to say it's been a challenging couple of years for all of us, because we've been in a tightening cycle. We've been in a cycle where every month was worse than the last in general, right? So things that worked last month don't necessarily work this month. If last month we take a widget and we do this with it and we do this with it and we put it out in the universe, and then suddenly a transaction comes and closes, right? And we monetize that, and then we go, okay, let's do that again. Well, it's really tough to run a business when what works today doesn't work tomorrow, and what worked yesterday doesn't work. I believe we're on the precipice of going into an easing cycle where there's going to be more transactions coming into the market. And so things that maybe didn't work yesterday do work tomorrow. and what worked today really works tomorrow. And that's such a better environment for a business owner to be in. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Well, yeah. So you're talking about the rates affect both sides. Who's going to leave a 3% interest rate on their house? Then they have to go and buy at, 6.1. That's a little bit more palatable than 8.25. And then the buyers, if you amortize a not very expensive house where you have a first-time buyer who's putting down 3% or 5%, that's a huge payment for these people for a not very expensive house when the rates were as high as they could be, which in the recent years was 8.25 back in July. So finding that rate that gets better, now you'll have sellers that will give up that rate to find a house that is better for their lifestyle, and you're going to have more buyers sort of jumping into the mix. So the rate helps everybody, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Exciting times. Well, thank you both. We're thrilled to have you again. We're always thrilled. I'm sure this will not be our last time. Any parting words before we let you guys go from you guys or Joe?
No, just thank you for having me. I always love it. I love chatting with you guys. It's always really educational and good for me too. So thank you.
Yeah. And you bring such value to our listeners. So thank you, Brittany. Heather?
Gosh, I just feel like I was taking notes, and it's so fun to rub shoulders with such amazing people. So thank you for letting me be on. And I think that, if we really dial in our systems and processes and the education, we're going to be fine. And like you said, I think there's some really positive days ahead. And so let's do it working in a team effort with that other co-op. I really hope that adversarial relationship of like yesteryear is in yesteryear, and people really embrace, like, let's work together to make this a great situation for everybody involved. And I know any transaction I've ever done with any of y'all is just like butterflies and rainbows. And that's what you bring to it. You bring such amazing skill sets and confidence and knowledge. And it's just a joy to be around y'all.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I think I mentioned all three of you in a post in Masters. You
did, I think. Yeah.
We're all thinking there's a listing and it's like, oh, it's that guy. And you're like, oh no. And I didn't want to put a negative spin on it. And I'm like, hey, every once in a while you see a listing and it's Heather Robbins or Brittany Gibbs or Steve Nassar. And you just think, oh, awesome. This is great. I hope my people like it. I want to be in a transaction with them. And so I guess my parting words are educate everybody, sellers, buyers, other realtors, and then show your worth. And that's not a like on the hood of a car thing. I'm talking about signing contracts. I'm not going back to the sex thing. Show your worth over time. Have them come in, have a long conversation, show your worth, and then get the autograph. And then move forward with confidence. And, they will too, and you will too. But I can't stress the education. That's the common theme of this podcast is education. And when you have a realtor on the other side who's educated, you just think, gosh, thank God, this is going to be fabulous. I'm really excited to be in transaction with this person who gets it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I would just say in conclusion, from my vantage point, with the commission changes from the settlement, at absolute worst, it's business as usual, but more likely, and what I'm absolutely feeling on the upside of that is we've gotten raises, we have more control over our businesses, and those who are good, strong agents are going to benefit from an elevated number of transactions because the weaker agents aren't able to hold their own with the changes for a variety of reasons. So it's exciting times in addition to an easing cycle beginning with housing. So thanks again, everyone. And thanks to our listeners for another episode of the Portland Real Estate Podcast.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Portland Real Estate Podcast, Oregon and Washington's #1 show for cutting-edge real estate discussions. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to the members of Masters in Real Estate, a private and exclusive Facebook group, and the #1 source for all real estate topics. Thanks for being there, gang. I love you. Finally, I want to thank our faithful listeners. Without an audience, we're just two guys talking to each other. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so the new episodes automatically come to you. Make it great.